Hi, and welcome again to English in the Modern Office. This week's lesson is the second lesson on telephones. In the first part, we're going to cover common spellings, including how we pronounce certain symbols. In the second part, we'll cover that dreaded topic, the voicemail, and spend quite a bit of time discussing active listening. In section 2.1, we'll practice some easy questions involving how to read things like numbers. Do we say O or do we say 0, for example? How do we read out big numbers? How do we read out telephone numbers? How do we read out prices? The first exercise will test how much you already know. After that, we'll go on and do a little pronunciation. We know from our vocabulary lessons what many words mean, but it's the pronunciation that tells us how to say it. Punctuation tells us when to breathe, so we can read a sentence and not run out of breath. Punctuation tells us at the end of a sentence what it's used to indicate when a statement is really a question. Right? The word right, when said with a rising tone, indicates a question. Right with a falling tone is an answer. Right? Right. Okay? Okay. You get it? We'll go on to consider how to read out more telephone numbers, when to pause to give people time to understand and write them down. We'll also cover the correct words to use when reading out symbols over the phone. We all know the symbol for @ when used in an email, but do we know about backslash, / or hash? The class will look initially at the use of some of the symbols. We all know these symbols, but we often use our own names for them. By the end of the week, you will know the terms used internationally by the professional business community. Along with symbols, we'll look some more at numbers. Some big numbers are easy to say, like telephone numbers, where we just use the individual digits. But it's important to pause at the right time and allow the listener to understand and write it down. Consider this. My telephone number is 0983 644 124. Compare this with my telephone number is 0983 644 124. The second version is much easier to listen to, right? Strangely enough though, different countries use a little pause in a different place. The way I read my number is common in the UK, but I've heard 09836 44124 in other countries, using one pause in the middle. The 433 pattern of reading out telephone numbers is easier than the 5-5 method. Be sure to practice the 433 method. Other big numbers are harder though. The use of words like millions, thousands, hundreds have a specific protocol. 2,163,254. The key here is to pause everywhere where there is a comma, just like you'd do if we were reading a story or an article out loud. Now, after numbers and symbols, we go on to consider the main phrases we typically use on the phone. There are not many of these to learn, so you should have few problems here. Simple phrases like, I'm sorry, David's not here today. Can I take a message? Or, I'll pass your message on as soon as I see him. This lesson covers the following outline areas about how to improve your listening skills as well. Maybe in a call center. Staying focused. We will cover how to prevent yourself from being distracted by colleagues or external noises, and concentrate on what your caller is saying. Detecting emotions. How do we listen to the emotion in your caller's voice? Does it match or endorse the words they are using? More on this in the lesson to follow. Asking questions. We will cover how to ask questions to gain more information on points you need to clarify is a great technique. More again on this later. Don't interrupt. Learn how to listen more effectively when you're not talking. So refrain from interrupting your caller. Let them finish what they are saying. Interruptions may break their train of thought. Not preempting. The lesson goes over how to avoid preempting what your caller is going to say. Chances are you'll be wrong, and you'll miss some of the content of their conversation. We go over recapping key facts, outlining how to summarize the caller's message and reflect back to check what you've heard, the key facts and content of the caller's conversation correctly. This also lets the caller know that you've understood them. Statements such as, "What I'm hearing is," and "So what you are saying is," are both great ways to reflect back and summarize. Now, remember pen and paper. Always have pen and paper at the ready. Get into the habit of making short, quick references to any questions you want to ask, or points you wish to raise or comment on. When your caller has finished speaking, refer back to your notes and take action. If you are thinking of answers and responses whilst the caller is speaking, you're not listening. Saying it again. In the lesson, we go over about whether you're having difficulty listening. Make the necessary adjustments. You might say, "I'm sorry, I missed that last point. Please repeat that for me." And we go over how to watch out for being stereotypical, making stereotypes of the people that you're listening to. We learn how to stereotype them by making assumptions about how you expect them to act and what you expect them to say. If we do that, it will bias our listening. We must not do this. We're going to learn how to be aware of barriers to listening. When we think we're right and the other person is wrong. We feel that we have to provide help right away. We prefer to talk rather than to listen. Or we're waiting for gaps or pauses to jump in with our own response. The class goes on to consider how it's better to use indirect questions rather than direct questions. When using the telephone, it's always better to sound polite and professional, especially when this involves requesting or confirming information. The best way to do this is to use indirect questions in the past tense. We might also include an apology for having to ask again. For example, compare this. "What's your name again?" with, "I'm sorry, what was your name again?" The second one sounds much more polite. So we cover how to apologize, how we might use "I'm sorry" and then use "was" instead of "is." Of course, the person's name is still the same, suggesting that we should use the present tense, but using the past tense says that we didn't hear the name correctly when it was said before. This is a much more acceptable way of doing things in the Western culture. What do you think? How does this compare with your culture? Similarly, a Westerner might say, "Would you like?" rather than "Do you want it or not?" which would certainly be considered rude. We will also cover how to listen actively. Active listening is a way of listening and responding to another person, improving mutual understanding by making repeated noises. Often when people talk to each other, they don't listen attentively, and are often distracted. In effect, they are only half listening and half thinking about something else. Active listening is a structured form of listening and responding that allows us to focus our attention on the speaker. The listener must always take care to attend carefully to the speaker's words and then repeat, in their own words, what he or she thinks the speaker has said. More on this in the coming lesson. Our lesson closes with a section on voicemails. Are they a good thing? What do you think? Do people listen to messages? How do we leave a good message that is likely to get a reply? Let's proceed directly to the lesson and find out.